she is on vacation. She might be connected by audio. Am I right, Josh? Junie did.
Yes, she said just by audio, maybe. She didn't know yet, so.
Sure. And also, do you know the Professor Khalid Maxon, whether he could be here?
I didn't receive, just Julie's was the only one that I received, so.
And Yinan, not sure. Sunki, have you heard anything from Yinan?
I emailed her, but I have not heard anything from her, so I don't know.
And I know Professor Mike Eichels told us he could not be here. I think I forwarded you the email, right, Josh? Mike Eichels.
No, but I'll make a note of it.
I think Farhan, you know that. I think he emailed me. I think if my memory is correct, just check there. Yeah. Anyone else in terms of? Scott Gibbard, do you know, Jennifer?
I haven't heard from Scott since we had our meeting with you.
Okay, I see. So
We have quorum at this point. We have quorum, I think, right?
Yes.
yeah, we have quorum. Good. Well, Netiquette started officially, and I think roll call instead of Junie. Bethany, could you help us? Symphony, could you help us? Actually, whatever.
I just talked to Josh.
I'm
Josh
doing
is
it virtually.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, and
So-
it'll be based on attendance. So.
Oh, and I'm going to send Wendell Williams the link because he doesn't have the Zoom link.
Yes, could you?
I will send it. I'm just letting you know.
I think Josh, did we also send the email attachment to him?
Yes.
Good.
Yeah, but he's claiming he doesn't have the link, so I'll just resend it to him.
Good, thank you. So next one is motion to, actually, we need to review the minutes and then any correction.
I already reviewed the minutes and I didn't see any corrections, so I'd like to move to approve the minutes.
Okay, thank you. So Jennifer moved, Joe second, thank you. So okay, so we're going to vote virtually or whatever you like, or orally. So all in favor, just raise the hands virtually because we can easily see it. Okay, so good, thank you. One absentee. Okay, we saw the message from Patrick. He absent from the minutes because he was not at the meetings. Sure, thank you. All right, that's next one, the brief report. Okay, I'm going to read what I have here. I try to be complete, but as complete as I can. If I miss anything, feel free to add after my report, okay? Good afternoon, everyone. As you know, our main issues are faculty update, faculty senator updates, and FIY went out to all faculty members by the end of May. We send off the newsletter only when we have faculty senator meetings. In addition, I have 7 business items. So 7, not several, 7 business items or matters to report to you. First, faculty senator worked with Dr. Paul Fraser, Vice Chancellor for Anti-Racism, Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and we organized an Asian American Symposium virtually on May 25th. That means the Asian American Heritage Month. Second, on June 6th, I attended the EOC meeting where we discussed the fall semester reopening plan on campus safety and health issues, which is related to COVID-19. I think I showed some part of information to you by email. Third, on June 9th, I had a meeting with Chancellor Nair and talked about the faculty hires, faculty equity issues, and the university strategic plan. I reiterate that shared governance and operating payable issues are still concerns to us. And number 4, on June 17th, I had an individual meeting with Provost Kumarajo and informed her about certain concerns and complaints related to some administrator from some academic units. Actually, academic units head who might have violated shared governance and operating payables in their decision-making process. Number 5, on June 15th, Provost Search Committee members had the first meeting with the Chancellor's office and with the TIFA consultants. We discussed the possible timeline and they listened to the ideas and suggestions from all the committee members with regard to the responsibility and expectation of the future provost candidates. Number 6, on June 23rd, I had a Zoom meeting with Associate Chancellor Wendell Williams, Associate Provost Mark Morris, and Provost Kumarajo about the no-show federal policy compliance. And actually, a document was shared with you by email. And finally, I had 2 meetings with Associate Provost Mark Morris. It is the first meeting on May 12th. Governance Committee co-chair Patrick McGross and Carney Maxson attended with me. On June 28th, I had an individual meeting with Dr. Mark Morris. We talked about the operating paper process, faculty hiring process, and equity issues. I know I also had another individual meeting with the co-chair of the Faculty Status Welfare Committee. I couldn't remember the dates. I will let Jennifer and Scott to add whenever they have opportunity. So thank you so much. Any question, comments for me? Yes, Patrick.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Lee. I was curious, we had received there was some discussion about the operating paper in relation to psychology. I was wondering, has that issue been resolved, or is that are we waiting for a later date to discuss it? Just a quick update if you wish to give one. Thank you.
Sure, thank you. At this point, we try to work out internally based on the procedure. So at this point, we were, in other words, okay, faculty senator will wait until whether they are going to work with the faculty member of the psychology department, because we have to respect procedure. So we need to work with the local administrators, like, the chair or director, and then dean, and then to the associate provost. So at this point, just be patient, and the governance committee may not be involved if we can resolve it internally. Thank you. Yes, Joe.
I follow up on the part of your report where you talked about having a meeting about faculty lines. Did the discussion of Gray Associates come up in that meeting?
Well, we talked about the faculty line at least on two occasions. One was at Chancellor Nan. I asked him whether we could, if enrollment increase in the future, if we are going to—
Provost Lee, I hate to interrupt, but I don't want to be on your conversation and so I can sign back in at a later time if you want me to, or I can stay on. I don't want to, be on your meeting if I don't have to.
That's okay. That's fine. You're perfectly okay.
Thank you. I apologize.
this is an open record, so you are welcome to attend anyone, so no problem at all. I think we talked about if enrollment increase, faculty line should be proportionally increased in the future as part of the university strategic plan. That's why I mentioned the university strategic plan, very important. That's point one. And second, and also I brought to attention that Mark's attention about the previous discussion between administrator, that means the provost, the chancellor, and faculty senate over a year ago. Any line, let's say vacant, should stay in the area, rather than we, kept by the provost or the dean. So I think these are the important issues. Excellent question, Joe. Thank you. Bethany?
Yeah, I'm just a little confused about the Senate's role in operating papers, because it's my understanding that operating papers are contractual between the administration and the union. And there's very clear guidance, very lengthy, clear guidance for grievance under Article 5 of the contract, which does not include Senate. And I'm, I think Senate can be an advisory body for this, but I'm just unclear as to what the Senate, like what the role of the Senate is in this process.
Great question, Bethany. In fact, because of this issue, we had three persons meeting. That means actually 4 people's meeting between Dr. Mark Morris and the governance committee chair, co-chair, Patrick McRose and Carnita Maxine. Basically, our role is advisory. We have no rights to prove or disprove. It's like any other matters. However, in terms of advisory, the process, we agreed. It's like IME or the new units reorganization. Once or after the collective bargaining units, that means faculty association approved, they sent to us in the future, and we are going to quickly to review them and give a quick recommendation. Am I right, Patrick?
Yes, I think that's kind of the conclusion we came to, that we felt that it wouldn't be a bad idea to have another set of eyes on an operating paper because they're so important. But I mean, maybe Bethany, you feel differently about that?
So yeah, I have a couple. So for, where places or for operating papers where there are grievances, I think that's absolutely fine. But if we're going to go systematically through all operating papers, I do kind of object to that for a couple of reasons. One is it's going to extend the process for all operating papers and we're already, it's already taking so long. It also, I don't think you can review operating papers quickly because they're very detailed and you have to know a considerable amount about the unit if you're not from that unit, and you have to understand how that unit works in order to accurately review them. And then I'm afraid it adds another level of administrative oversight in a process that, that already has a lot. Plus that concept of adding that added level of administrative oversight seems sort of antithetical to the mission of the Senate, right? Which is more shared governance than administrative. So those are just my issues. As I said, I'm fine with it if there's active grievance and the Senate can help out. But I think if we're going to systematically do all operating papers, I'm definitely opposed to that. Thank you.
Well, this is a very good question, Bethany. And obviously, originally, when we started the reorganization, academic and new units and faculty senate, they got involved. And in a way, it's okay for opening paper, and which is the academic policy, affect faculty interest, and governance committee, or even a new ad hoc committee maybe need to be involved, at least to check the voting process and to check whether make sure, faculty member in the different units got involved, whatever kind of votes. Again, it's an open area. We are going to have a more discussion. We can, again, I will defer to the governance committee. Joe?
I asked Bethany just a clarification question. So is your position that the faculty senate has an interest, in fact, in operating papers being done? So we should press the administration at every chance to where the status is of operating papers, but operating papers because their legal processes in a certain way is best left to the institution which deals with issues about legal issues, i.e. the faculty association.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I just wanted to clarify that argument you were making.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Joe, you asked the question about our own faculty senators operating paper. Am I right? Where are we now? Or
No, I'm not asking about that. I was asking about, I was just asking just to clarify Bethany's position. I was just really asking nothing more than that.
Yeah, essentially, yes. There's a process in place for operating papers and for grievances that has, that is contractually obligated between the FA and the faculty. And if that process, so we should use that process, right? Because that's the process that is we're contractually obligated to use. So I guess as an advisory board, if an agreement cannot be reached and if we can lend aid, then I am all for the Senate being part of that process. But yes, you are correct.
well, very good. Honestly, I agree with you guys. So faculty senator is less powerful in comparison with faculty association, but we just, our voice is just advisory. Many of our faculty members that now own faculty association, at least they do not pay the due or membership, even though faculty association represent all the faculty members on campus in terms of interest, in terms of salary, working note, or open paper. And that's why our role is that after the faculty association went through or gone through the open paper, and we just have another look. We have no power to prove or disprove. I think that's the part of the process. And also we do not want to delay the process. Thank you. If you have no more question, I have Associate Chancellor William Wendell here, is our special guest, Mr. William Wendell, Wendell Williams. Okay. Are you ready?
I am ready, and you can call me whatever you want to in this kind of heat. I'll answer to any questions. First, to the president, thank you for inviting me, and to the other members of the executive committee. I really hope that you're having a good summer. For those of you who may be working, I understand how you feel. For those who are not, I don't understand how you feel, but I do wish that you would have a great break. Let me give you a brief update, and I'll be happy to entertain any questions that you might have. Most institutions, that's one thing I found out by coming to SIU, is that in a number of different instances, we don't fit most institutions category. But in most institutions, about every 7 years, the Department of Education will by themselves schedule a review of that institution to ensure that the institution is following all the guidelines to distribute Title IV funds. Just like every 10 years or so, we have a reaccreditation visit, and we get a chance to check up to see if we're following guidelines that's set forth by the accrediting agency. Well, come to find out that since 1979, or maybe never, SIU has had a program audit. Now, remember, these are set by the Department of Education. Now, there are certain things that normally would trigger an audit, even if you had one within the normal 7-year period. Those things would be change of a CEO, and we've had 7 changes of CEOs just at the chancellor's level in the last 10 years or so, and not counting change of presidents, but then change of financial aid directors, or normally those things would kick up a review. It's not that you're doing anything wrong, but they want to make sure that you're doing everything right. So and the way that this occurs is that on, let's say June 15th, or June, this happened actually May 13th. On May 13th, we got the letter from the department saying, you're going to have a review. In 1 week's time, they gave us a list of about 35 different items that we had to send to them by the end of the following week. And then about a week later, they come and they will request 30 files or so, and they go through those files with a fine-tooth comb. While they're here during that week that they're here, they'll ask the question if you can find a way to reconcile that particular issue, then they will consider that as part of their report. So they came, and during the week of June 21st or so, they gave us a list of 15 or 20 things that they found. Now, keep in mind, they're auditors. And if they don't find something, then they didn't do a good job. So, and we would have been highly disappointed. The chancellor and I welcome this review, especially with us being new. It's good to set back to ground zero. One thing that directly affects faculty that they found, and they also found the exact same thing over SIU Edwardsville a few years back when they visited them. And SIU Edwardsville ended up having to pay back about $1.3 million. So what they'll do is that if they find a systemic issue, then they will see how systemic that issue is, whether it affected the payments that they gave to the institution and the institution or gave to the students. And if it's systemic in nature, they will ask you to pay back a percentage of those funds. If it's non-systemic and they find 10% of the cases that they reviewed out of those 30 files, then they may ask you to pay back just the individual amounts. One systemic issue that they found dealt with no-shows. In our current process, we have a grade that's called NS, the NS grade, and you guys will distribute that grade to students who have never shown up for any of their classes. And you give us that grade in December when the grades come out. But according to the regulations and I sent you a copy of those, if a student does not begin attendance, then they want to know at the census date, if we have a census date, and we do, they want to know at the census date whether this student had ever attended at all. If the student had not attended by the census date, we need to send that money back to the institution, and we have 30 days to do that. So what we're doing is waiting till the end of the semester, seeing those students who never showed up, and then sending the money back. The money has been sent back, but all of the interest that's been gained from that 10th class day till the 16th week, they don't like that. So Jennifer, imagine that you own your own university, Cherry University, and you were a proprietary school, and you bought 20,000 names from SAT, the great students too, because you wouldn't have an institution that wouldn't have great students. You bought the names from those institutions and you enrolled all of those students, and you drew down $200 million of financial aid. And at the end of the term, you said, wow, they never showed up, and you send that money back. So you returned all 200 million, but notice how much interest that you had earned. And that's one reason why they put this in place. So we've got to do something about our no-show reports. And we called around to every institution in the state of Illinois, and it seems like every institution that had had one of these visits, they have changed their process, and the institutions that have not had a visit had not changed the process. And I know we're a non-attendance taking institution by definition of the Department of Education. So this is not necessarily going to require you to take attendance, but they want to know if a student has not actively participated in the class, one form or another, during the first 10-day period. So basically at 100,000 foot, that's the scenario. So we want to work very closely with you to determine the least intrusive way of getting this done electronically. You know, the simple way would be, Joe, you may not be taking roll during the first 10 days, but you see that you have a student who has never shown up by they hadn't turned in a paper or done an assignment. If it's online, they may not have logged in. However ways that the faculty determine, but you would report, let's say that on the first day, all of your students had actively participated or attended the class or however you define it. You could go online like you submit grades and put 0 students there, and you're complete for that semester until you get ready to do your grades at the end of the term. And so we will monitor those submissions just like we do with grades. The registrar's office will, and we'll alert the provost and the deans of anything that we might have missing. And we'll complete that requirement that way. So by the end of that week, we had itemized what our plan was. And we hope that the department will say, wow, SIU has a plan. They love the plan. Even though it's a systemic issue, we're just going to give this little, because we think that we're going to have to pay something back because it's systemic, but we hope that that won't be so much. And even if it is, we've actually had those resources and deposited those resources and gained that interest off of that. So big picture in a simplified way, that's my explanation of what we've got to do. And so I wanted to start with the Faculty Senate to let them know where we've got to head to do this, see if there's any issues, work with you on any ideas. But right now we think doing it through the grade reporting system may be the easiest way to do it. We have a number of other devices that's out there that will allow you to do this any other way, but we can talk about that as well. So President Lee, that's my brief summary. I'll answer any questions that the team may have.
Thank you, Associate Chancellor Williams. I think there is one question from Patrick. Here, Patrick, you have a question, and then after that, Farhan, then Joe.
Yes, thank you, Associate Provost Williams, for your
Yes, sir.
report. I posted in the chat. I don't know if you could see it. I just want to explain myself clearly. I'm just wondering, so the student is reported at 10 days as a no-show. We tell you they're a no-show, but then they show up. Then what ends up happening?
Couple of things can end up happening. In theory, the last day to register is the 10th class day. And so a student who shows up after that time, we know that the current practice is that some students have not been added to the register until the 16th week when we get a grade. And that's been a challenge too, because we can't get a count for that student. So if it's the 12th class day, if after census date, and that student needs to register for classes, then I think that there has been a process been put in place. But ideally, we would tell that student, if they can't get in a late start class or 8-week class that might be coming in the future, then we just don't register that student. That would be the ideal, but we know the hearts and the minds of us, what we want to do here. We don't want to make a dramatic change, but ideally at most institutions, when you say the last day to register is the 10th class day, that is the last day to register for that semester.
But I'm thinking not necessarily just the student is registered, but they don't show up.
If the student is registered and they are reported as a no-show during the first 10 class days, do you let that student start the class at that point?
That's kind of, what I'm wondering.
Okay. Once again, the faculty determine the academics and what happens in the class. So if you allow that student to start, you then would just report to us and we would not count that student as a no-show. I'll have to ask that question of the department. We took it the other way around where the student was never registered. But if a student was not registered, the thinking of most people is that if a student misses 10 class days, the likelihood of them being successful that semester is pretty low. However, we know that there are going to be exceptions to all of that. But so what we would do is work with the registrar's office to try to get that student unreported as a no-show.
Okay. And I don't mean to belabor the point, but I definitely have had that situation where the student is registered, hasn't shown up, and then all of a sudden they appear. And I guess what you're saying is that
they will
it's
earn
sort
the
of up
grade
to
in the
me.
class work based upon what you and that student works on.
It's kind of up to me
Yes, sir.
to determine, okay, I'm going to let you in, but then the other side of this too is that the institution would technically support my saying, sorry, 10 days, I've reported you as a no-show. The door is closed for you on this class. Is that
And
also the implication?
And some instructors currently do that. If they don't show up there and they're dropped from that class at that point, then that's what occurs. The difficulty is that we will then have to try to, if you're going to let that student stay there, we've got to register that student, and then we've got to unreport that to the Department of Education. You know, for the good of the institution, it's better to say this student was not counted anyhow because our official census date was on the 10th class day. So for the good of the institution, it might be best to tell that student to wait or to drop the course, because if they are registered and they don't show up until after that point, we will have dropped them as a no-show. So to register them back in there creates an error in our reporting to the Illinois Department of Higher Education. So that creates another challenge there.
Okay, and this is my last point. I really
No,
apologize.
Pat, and keep in mind, I'm trying to walk that fine line of saying we can't tell the faculty what to do, even though I'm trying my best to suggest to the faculty what to do.
No, and I appreciate it.
Yes, sir.
My final point would just be, will there be some sort of a memo sent to faculty or something explaining this? Because it would be very helpful. I know just to have some sense. Again, you're not. I realize you're not going to say this is what you have to do, but just like what you just articulated, the good of it's easier for the institution not to have this registered as an error. Some kind of advice or just an outline of the general situation so that faculty are aware of, okay, well, this is why it might not be a great idea, barring pedagogical reasons.
Yes.
For administratively to include the student in the class after 10 days.
I hear you, and that is one reason why I served as provost for about 3 months doing and so I'm so glad that I'm in enrollment management now. I will have this discussion with the provost and let them know that it might be beneficial for administrative purposes to explain what happens to a student who is unregistered and then try to get re-registered after the census date.
Thank you. Thank you for the question. Thank you for the answer. Next one, Fahad.
Thank you, Yiting. Thank you, Wendell, for coming here and explaining it to us. You did a great job. So many of my questions Patrick already asked. So I guess very little is left. So I had a few instances where some students show up only on the tests, and these are very, very smart people, young mind, and they don't need to attend classes, and they do pretty well. They're not going to get grades for homeworks or quizzes, but they will do fairly well in the tests. And as a matter of fact, they're not going to get an A, but they will pass. Okay, so in those situations, I don't think like how we are going to implement this that you're suggesting.
So you bring up old fearful memories when I was a teacher, an instructor at one time, and this is the way we had to do this, because in Texas we have a census date and we're actually funded based upon the number of students that we submit. So we can't change that number after it's submitted. So one thing that I would always do when it got close to that 7th or 8th day, I shoot an email or a phone call to the student and say, look, I'm about to report you as a no-show. Are you going to participate in my class or not? Yes or no? And then if I didn't get a response, no show. If I did get a response, participation in the class, and that email was my documentation that they were participating in the class. Now, once again, I'm walking that fine line between saying what to do and what not to do, but that is a suggestion that I would make.
So that's additional work for faculty, right?
I understand,
Although
but
keeping track of people, it's a big
it got that student who was really good and didn't need to come to class every day or participate. It got that student on the roster. Because, you know, one thing that I've been observing here is that we've got students who are reporting on the roster to get a grade, and they've never been on the roster at all. So a lot of these students, we have been losing out all of that revenue for that year for that student. And then we have to force the student to register, and then they get into these huge debt and problems and stuff like that. So again, we need to get the roles certified so what we're submitting to the clearinghouse and everyone else is as accurate as possible.
All right,
So
thank you.
I hate the extra work, but it's, you know, part of that thing of just saying, yeah, I'm your instructor and I'm certifying this roster.
Thank you. Next one, Joe.
Good afternoon, Vice Chancellor. I want to maybe ask a different kind of question because again, Patrick answered all my questions also. But
Good job, Patrick.
I thought of a few additional ones while I was waiting. And it's really to think of this not as something to maybe to reorient the discussion about this a little bit. This is a mandate imposed by the federal government. Understand why it exists, but I think we can also use this as an opportunity. I'll put a couple things together here. One, we have a 2-week add deadline. You generally can't add a class after 2 weeks of semester. So that lines nicely with this 10-day day, this census day. 2, as you well know, we still have issues with our retention rate every year. And so if somebody does not show in my class in 10 days, I do a no-show report. And what I'm hoping for, and I just want to throw this out there, this is the opportunity part, I think, is I report that the student hasn't showed in my class, but perhaps that student is showing to Bethany's class. Well, that's a retention issue then. And that suddenly now identifies, which I think this university's had a hard time in the past identifying, who is our real body of students that we got to spend a lot of effort on retaining. I think we try to, we throw things at the wall hoping it will stick, but that's just my impression of what we do with academic advisors and everybody else with Saluki Cares or whatever. But actually having an actual body of students on a list of people we know are not going to classes, which is the number one reason you fail out of college is you don't go to classes usually.
Bring up something that's going to address Dr. Chow.
Call me Farhan.
Okay, thank you, Farhan. I appreciate that so very much. You address one thing that's going to address his questions. One way is that each of you have an advisor and a retention and recruitment coordinator. And though if you get their names to them, that is their role and responsibility to reach out for students or so. So in my practice, what I would do, Joe, is, and we only have to turn the money back in if they're not participating in all their classes. So if they're participating in Sherry's class, that's great news, even though they may not have known that they were registered for your class, which is a good point as well. And we can get them very quickly. So really doing that first week or so, if nobody showed up during the first week, and as we get good at this, students are going to realize, you know, it's only going to take one semester for them to be dropped from their classes. And we know that whenever you put something new in place like this, we've got to migrate our way into this. We're not going to be so hard Farhan that we will not be able to accommodate certain students. But after a couple of semesters, people are going to learn that, look, you're going to be withdrawn from this class. And what we found out in states that do this is that it's help retention because, number one, if you only have 12 hours and you're dropped from one, then you only have 9 hours and you lose your automobile insurance. All right. You lose a number of other things. And so that mama and that daddy starts to help us with our retention efforts. But so 2 things to walk away from there. Remember the R&Rs and the advisors that you have in your department. Number 2, it will help with retention efforts for a number of different reasons. And then number 3, as soon as you get notification of participation from your students, you've got this done, and it's 10 minutes or so, or 5 minutes to get in there and click that button or so.
Thank you. Joe, still have a question?
No, I'm sorry, I didn't lower my
Okay.
hand.
Well, Associate Chancellor Wendell Williams, I think next week, we have more faculty senators will ask more tough questions. Now, this is a good exercise.
If I can get past Patrick, I'm going to be just fine with next week.
Yeah, good. Thank you.
All right,
Thank you very much for being here. Okay.
Now, if anyone thinks of anything else, email me. If you have any questions about enrollment and update. So just briefly right now, things are looking pretty decent. The chancellor just emailed me and asked me to do a brief report for 2 o'clock when he gets on. So let me get off and run that report real quick, and I'll be there for you.
Look forward
Thank you guys
to
so
the
much.
update. Thank
Bye-bye.
you. As always.
Thank you so much.
Yes, sir. Thank you too.
Okay, see you next week. All right. Before the chancellor, the provost be here, we still have about 18 minutes to report. So executive committee, obviously we have no report except what I said 15 minutes ago. So election committee, Bethany?
I have nothing to report. As you recall, we're just in a holding pattern for faculty contracts to start again in August. I will get a revised list of faculty. My guess is we'll have more new faculty to distribute calls for nominations for the open Senate seats. But again, that'll commence once contracts have started again. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. I noticed that the Walter Mates is not here. I just realized this. Joe, do you know?
I don't know why Walter's not here. We have nothing new to report in undergraduate education policy committee, except I just want an FYI in case because faculty have been off contract and we've been researching and traveling and whatnot. As far as I can tell, they did not hire in this. They did a search for associate provost of academic programs, and they did not hire any of the candidates. And what they did instead was appoint the associate dean of students in my college, in Patrick's College, Andrew Yupa, to fill a 6-month interim position as the APAP. That started on July 1. That is very troubling because we won't have. I'm going on sabbatical the end of December. I won't be here in the country even in the spring of 23, and I'm probably going to get somebody in my seat for the time I'm on sabbatical. We won't have any institutional memory other than what Walter has about how anything is done with education and undergraduate education policy. We won't have anybody in the provost office who knows what they're doing, and we'll have very little knowledge on our end. So I just raise as an FYI, as something to plan around in the next 6 months.
Thank you. Just comments on your sabbatic. I know Walter is not here, and just a reminder, committee co-chair, maybe you, I know the candidates, Rolando Gonzalez is, but will be the possible co-chair. Make sure we go through the process. Thank you, Joe. Budget committee, I know Mike is not here, and Farhan.
Yeah, so we haven't met yet. I guess we will probably start doing that, but we don't have anything new to report at this time.
Okay, thank you. Committee on committee, we have Yinan and Song Hee.
Yes, thank you. So we did receive the names for people who, so new faculty who had been newly elected with the last election that Bethany had run. And so one of our orders of business is to integrate them onto our committees. So we are going to follow through now with that process. And in our next executive committee, we'll bring that back to the group for approval. And then we also, Sung-hee and I got together in the springtime, worked out a call for volunteers. And we need to now take that to Josh and have Josh send it out. But by the time we did it, people were off contract. So we were a little dubious about getting anything sent out in the interim period between like May and June when summer school started. So we'll go back and work on that so that the university-wide committees, at least we can do a first call for volunteers and see how what materializes. And if we have to do it again come August, we will do that in order to get all of our positions filled. But there's 3 positions that need to be filled because the positions are going to be terminated soon due to they're going to expire. The terms will expire, and I think that'll happen before we finish up with all of our business. So we do need to take care of that. And so we will follow up with that in next month's report on our results and where we're at. So thank you.
Thank you. Anything to add, Sung-hee?
Just Elaine, and I would like to thank you to Josh because Josh provided updated the list of university committee vacancies. So we appreciate. Thank you, Josh, for your hard working.
Okay. Any question for them? If no, we are going to move to the faculty status welfare committee. I know Scott is not here. Jennifer, Sherry?
Hello, good afternoon. I'm just going to keep it brief because I know some of these things could be elaborated upon, but I'm not going to right now because our committee will need to meet whenever the contracts start again. And so I did want to ask, it did come out an email about there being a concern when I had wanted Josh to post some updates on the operating paper on the Faculty Senate and University website. I guess we had gone all the way through the chancellor had signed the resolution for the administrative changes that we made in the operating paper. And I guess that there was a legal question about the School of Medicine. So any updates on that? Because I sent a response.
Okay. Thank you, Jennifer. In fact, after I received your email, I had a meeting with Mark Morris on June 28th. You think it's fine, no problem, just FYI. We do not need to do anything. Legally, it's fine.
Okay, awesome. Very good. I wanted to make sure and just get an update on that. Another thing that we're still keeping a pulse on is Dr. Zhao. He is actually going through an appeal process, I guess, at this point. So we're definitely going to monitor the situation and be in support of what we can for Dr. Zhao. So I'm trying to think if there's anything else. Oh, there was an email that came through on the provost response to the faculty lines. And so that will be something that the Faculty Status and Welfare Committee will be meeting about as well. And, you know, as far as the loss of lines or it's basically just a response to the faculty line situation. So I think that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. You have a lot. In fact, thank you so much. Any question for them, for this committee?
I have a question.
Yeah.
I do have a question about the review of operating papers. did we make a decision to review operating papers as a faculty senate before they go for final signature?
Well, I think this question was raised by Bethany. We had a discussion at this point. We're just advisory, and we have not made a final decision based on our meeting. That means between Mark Morris and Patrick McRoth, and also Khalid, Maxine, and myself. Okay. And the faculty senate may just review briefly without delay the process. We have no power to deny or approve or disapprove. So that's what the status now. And if needed, we may have to form a special ad hoc committee. It's like new units we did for reorganization, different department or schools, if needed. But now, obviously, it is up to the governance committee. We have not made any decision yet. Is this correct, Patrick? I know Maxine is not here. Okay, any questions before we move to the governance committee? Okay, maybe Patrick, you can add some more information about the open favor.
No, we had that meeting on, I guess you said it was May 12th. I don't quite remember. And I think it, as we indicated, it's really just another set of eyes. And I feel that if the faculty senate doesn't want to do this, or if the governance committee doesn't want to do this, then they don't want to do this. And therefore we won't have this extra level of review. But I think it really is just, as Yu-Ting said, it's just kind of, if somebody has a question, for example, I could anticipate maybe a unit. I mean, Bethany made an excellent point about this should be, the units know themselves the best, clearly. But I could anticipate somebody saying, oh, we're the English department and we have this language. Do you know about this language relating to tenure and promotion? How do other people phrase this regarding to service or something, faculty service for promotion and tenure? And maybe biological sciences has this outstanding language relating to service for promotion and tenure. And that's where I would just envision the governance committee might be useful in saying, well, the English department, maybe you want to ask biological sciences how they phrase this. And it would just be kind of as a almost facilitating that sort of networking where we could be useful. So that is my understanding of what our role might be in the review of operating papers. And I wouldn't necessarily even call it a review. It would just be more sort of like you say to a colleague, could you read through this and make sure that there aren't any glaring errors? So.
Very good. Thank you. Any question for governance committee? Well, we have an Idaho committee on institutional ranking and education quality. Maybe Joe, you could have something.
I think we can probably jointly report on this because so Yu-Ting and I and our third co-chair, whose name is escaping Michael Hyland.
Yes.
We received very last minute last week a 77-page document from the chancellor's office, and what it was this year's reporting data to U.S. News and World Report. It's the first time we, I think, as a faculty senate, have ever received this information before. So Yu-Ting and I were asked to make any corrections to it. It was a weird request because we don't know the data well enough, I think, to make corrections. But it was, I read the report, Michael read the report, Yu-Ting wrote up some comments that he had about some questions he had and comments he had. And so I'm hopeful that this is setting a new precedent of a sense of providing the Senate with timely information, because they're in the U.S. News Report report that they submitted is all kinds of data in one place. Data about, did you know, for example, that we grew by 20 faculty lines last year as a university compared to the year before? I mean, we keep hearing about loss of lines all the time, and we know there are loss of lines. So I'm curious where those 20 extra people are to be found that are being reported to you as a neutral report. There's information about the budget every year, the academic budget that's being spent. There's information, there's all kinds of really rich data. And what I was suggesting to you, Ting, was that we could bring this back to our committees and start using this as an inquiry-based method to really just ask better questions of administration in our vis-a-vis our respective committees and our jurisdictions. So we can have a better university. So that's just where I think we are with that.
Okay, thank you. In fact, well said. I mean, first of all, they give us only 2 days.
Yes.
Less than, less than 48 hours. And second, the data, in fact, we should need to know, but not available to us. So, and third, and I intended to show it with at least faculty senate executive council or faculty senator. And I was told at this point that the information is not finalized. So we were only allowed to share it with this IDOL committee. Am I right, John?
I don't even think we were allowed to share it with them because I certainly haven't sent it out yet. I think it's just between you and me and Michael at this point.
I think Mike sent out to the committee.
Did Michael send it out to everybody else?
Yes.
Okay, I couldn't recall whether he did or not.
I received it and I was able to do it.
Okay, good.
My point about that, Yu-Ting, might be less to that story than it sounds. It might be that the researcher over in institutional research literally got it done in the last minute.
Right. So
and it might not be any like withholding information from the Senate, so they had to give it to us. Because as far as I understand it, they never gave it to us before now.
You're right. In the future,
that we got this information because we have this ad hoc committee.
Yeah, thank you. Any question for us? I know in the future, we hope they will give us more time, more day, more information. Any question for this committee? So if not, we're going to I think all the business in September, again, okay, we do not know whether we should meet physically or continue Zoom or both hybrid. I know some people in Springfield or School of Medicine may go to be hybrid. Yeah.
On that question, I guess where I was back in April when we last asked this is do we have a room available on campus large enough to socially distance them? In case people, there are a variety of reasons. Look, there's COVID is still real. There are people that get sick or don't get sick. I think it's also people may not feel comfortable yet.
Exactly.
So if there was a large enough space on campus, then we can go back to the physical room. But otherwise, I would recommend Zoom for a while longer. Bethany, you're gesticulating.
I know before Bethany ask us a question, Josh told me they can.
I have the answer.
You can resolve student service room, the regular room, now the big room. So I'm not sure that room would be big enough to accommodate all the needs. So that's what I know. Bethany, you have a question?
Yes, so we had a discussion about this back in May. Excuse me. And I went ahead and tried to find a room. My criteria was no less than 50, considering our 36 members, plus guests, plus members of the public that wanted to view. So I figured something smaller than that would not work. What I came back with was a list of rooms that were 50 or up. There were maybe 6 of them. Most of them were capacity of 50. And when viewing those rooms, they would definitely not meet the criteria that most of the people on the Senate would want for a space. However, Lawson Room 161, it was the outstander on that list. It holds 250 people. It is a lecture hall. It's a lovely lecture hall. So what I did was go ahead and reserve that room for the FSEC meetings and the FS meetings. The only, excuse me, the only date that was not available was finals week, because all rooms are basically on lockdown and for finals for that week. So I have a room reserved because it seemed like the majority of the Senate was interested in in-person meetings, as am I. COVID allowing, of course, and COVID policy allowing, of course. So that room is reserved if we want, as a committee, or if we want a group of us to go review that room, just so it's not just my eyes, but just to make sure that it is something that is acceptable for in-person Senate meetings. That would be great. It is a classroom, so it can be set up for Zoom participation or hybrid participation from other faculty members. So that room, again, it is reserved for every meeting except for the December finals week.
So is this room, Josh, is this the same room, Josh, you told me, or different room?
No, I reserved SSB 150, 160.
Oh.
Okay, so maybe can you two work out on the same page, and then we can present the information. And the worst scenario is that at the NEAS talk in September, we can do it virtually. I think it's good we explore different options, have something to back up if needed.
Oh, sorry about that, Josh. I was unaware that you were looking into it, and I had mentioned that I was
I
looking
suppose
into
since
it at the last meeting.
Since the provost, chancellor, and vice chancellor are here, I would just add to this comment and close this conversation really down, would be that depending on what our university policy is with COVID, because of course, if there's another surge, then we have to probably have a different policy than we have now. So that's in ways a conversation also with the provost and the chancellor. And I see that the provost has raised her hand.
Yeah, I just wanted to make another suggestion, another option for, as you're considering rooms, is that in the past, that when we have tried to use 150, 160, like bringing in School of Medicine electronically was not working out as well. So that time, the 7th floor in the library, that 754, 752 was used, because you also have the cattle walker is just downstairs and can help if you're bringing in some people via Zoom or otherwise. The very last time that we had met in person was there. So I just want to mention that. You can go with whichever room everyone wants, but just in terms of historical data, that was something.
Thank you. Bethany, you want something to add?
Yes, just a quick mention. Thank you, Provost, for that suggestion. And I believe I've been in those rooms in prior years. I think that just the biggest concern is making sure that the amount of room for like social distancing and because everybody in Senate's going to have a different feeling about that is paramount when we're going about picking this room. So thanks.
Okay, thank you. That's all the business. We have no new business, and thank you very much, Chancellor Nan, for being here, Provost Kumarajo, and also Associate Chancellor William is here again. And we have plenty of time for question and answers. We are open to all the questions. Okay, Joe.
I just want to kind of thank you, everyone, for being here on July on a very steamy, hot day. I sent out an email last week about where we were with recruiting and retaining where we are with recruiting our next freshman class, because it is that time of the season, I suppose. And I guess Wendell told us at 1 o'clock that he was working on a new report because the data has even shifted, even after the few days that I sent it. So where are we with recruitment?
Let me, Joe, thanks for that. We always anticipate and look forward to you asking that question. But before we dig into some of that with enrollment, let me give you let me give you a larger picture of what's happening in the state based on a meeting that I just attended with several university presidents. Enrollment is down at a lot of universities that we typically compete with across the state. So I need to make sure that we set the right expectations here, and even out of our state. Murray State, I talked to the president at Murray a couple of weeks ago. They are down in their enrollment. Southeast Missouri State is down in their enrollment. So a lot of states or schools that typically have, obviously been some of our competitors from a geographical standpoint, not from a university reputation standpoint, they've been down. As you know, the flagship in this state is up and is thinking about capping their enrollment in their freshman class. And as you know, we're going to try and take advantage of some of that. But there's so many efforts that are underway right now as I look at some of the Power BI data. So this is not just me, rambling off here. And Wendell, you correct me if I'm out of whack here, but I know if we take our undergraduate new student enrollment, it's very promising. We're probably up close to 6 or some odd percent, probably 6.5%. Wendell, does that sound about right?
You're a little low, Dr. Lane. We're at 7.5%. When I include all the off-campus sites with that as well.
Okay, well that's even better. So
I hate to correct you.
I love to be corrected on that. So as you heard Wendell mention, if you're looking at all of our sites, that's about 7.5% increase for undergraduate new students. So that's
that July to July? Is that July 5th to July 5th? I'm just trying to get a sense of.
Yeah.
That's measured. That's where vis-a-vis this time, because we always seem to get that kick in the very end of the last 2 weeks when we get the kids coming in.
So Joe, we're 7 weeks out from that date. Last year at this time, we were at 1,126. We're at 1,208. And remember, in census date, we was at 1,360. So we've been doing roughly 80 to 90 students per week, depending upon if we had an orientation session or so. So
those sessions, on orientation, to piggyback on it, those sessions right now, we're up about 16% in the student orientation sessions, with several more to go. And we just added several virtual sessions for enrollment. And here's why. When myself and the provost and others, Wendell, I think, was there about a year ago, almost a year ago, we were in the Chicago area. And one of the criticisms they had for us is they said, well, if you stop all of your orientations in June or early July or mid-July, you're going to miss a lot of our students coming from Chicago because they just start moving around in July. And so we also know it's a hardship for them to get here. It's not easy to go 4 hours south and come to Carbondale. So we put a lot more of our student orientations in a virtual format for those students down the stretch that will last all the way out through August. And we hope to be able to get more students in that regard. The housing contracts right now are up 2.8%. That is also a good sign. So it's a good and a bad problem, right? Because you want to house all of your students and you don't want students looking for housing elsewhere. We'd rather have them on campus, but that's an area that we are watching to make sure that we do well there. Wendell, why don't you cover a little bit of our continuing students? I had us down about 22 students. I don't know if that's changed, and that's an overall number.
Yes, as of a few minutes ago, it was down 30 students in continuing students. We are sitting, just a second here. In continuing students, we are sitting just about at a little bit more than 800 students, I believe.
So essentially, we usually call that one flat. And then what about our transfer?
I was going to ask about transfers, because that number seemed worrying to me earlier in the spring when you were first reporting on it.
Wendell, what are you?
Okay.
have to transfer?
Yes, we have 1,414 transfer students admitted and 656 students registered, which is about 61 more than the week before, which is almost double. So this time of the year, I wouldn't get worried too much, Joe, about our transfer students, is that this is the time of the year for them to begin to come in. They're finally getting transcripts sent from the community colleges and those things. And so those transcripts are getting evaluated. So we're up slightly on registrations. Now, our applications and all those other things are down, but our applications is up.
Hey, Wendell, I had it said 2.54%.
That's correct.
As an increase on transfer.
As an increase on registered.
All of our numbers are now showing in the positive because they were not in the spring, earlier in the spring.
Yeah, but I think, Joe, what you're probably referencing is the data that I provide where I split it between the on-campus and online.
Yes, you did, yes.
Transfers. So the on-campus transfers are down in all categories of applications, admissions, and registration. But because the online is really picking up, overall, it is up. However, even the on-campus, it is improving. A couple of weeks ago, it was in double digits. Now it's in single digits. And as we do this home stretch, the students start making their decisions. And so it gets better. So by the time we have 10th day, overall, it'll be much better. But even today, overall, when you combine the on-campus and online, we are up.
And it's really a little confusing, even though it sounds generic and basic. And we're probably making it a little more complicated than we should. Wendell and I, we were just kind of conversing on text. You know, I don't want to know how to make a clock. I just want to know what time it is. So a lot of it is just, you know, let's just report on, okay, overall, are we up or down? And then we can dig into all the other things when we get there.
Sure.
But I think we're going to try and make it a little less complicated in terms of you know, whether we're up here, down here in this category, this segment, on campus, off campus, online. It's a lot to be looking at there. So we're going to try and do a better job of making it a little more simple to read.
I don't mind complexity because we are a complex university. And I think in terms of the strategies that we got to keep updating year after year, month after month, in terms of getting our recruitment right. I mean, I'm talking about my job as a program coordinator, right, and director of undergraduate studies. You know, how do I pitch the program? How do I tweak how I pitch my program if my transfer numbers are down or the numbers across the university are down? So I think these are very, sounds encouraging. So thank you for all your hard work on that.
So Joe, to do what Dr. Lane said, when you look at our continuing students, as you can see, let me move you guys up. As you can see, our continuing students is down slightly. Just continuing only. We're down roughly 90 some students or so. When you look at our students who are transfer students, and this looking at everybody at every location, we're up slightly.
Right.
When you're looking at our new student population, you're looking at our new student population and new student only, you're seeing that we're up slightly. This is all new students, not first time and freshmen, but all new students. And so just to keep it real simple, and another group that we have been ignoring that we're focusing on now is the students that we're readmitting. And this is a very positive sign. We have a higher number of students being readmitted than we've ever had in the last 4 or 5 years or so. So this is a positive sign about students coming back and us being a lot more attractive to students. So overall, I think the picture is very bright for where we are right now.
And Joe, let me add to that. We're still 7 weeks out. So we're always, you know, cautiously optimistic. But there is an area of concern that we're trying to address. You remember this time last year, we had a significant number of funds that we could help pay balances down for continuing students. Many of you probably remember a lot of the CARES dollars or the HERF dollars. And well, right now we have about $3.7 million that we're able to help continuing students with in a number of categories. You know, these are students that are doing well. These are some students that have the opportunity to submit an appeal to get their financial aid back or to get off of probation. They've got to be able to clear a few barriers, but essentially we would put dollars on those continuing students to help with the continuing retention number that's out there. These are students obviously from fall to fall that we're trying to get back. So I think Wendell and his team, we've just launched out all of the students that fit within the category. Wendell, about how many students were we talking about that we reached out to?
So as we speak right now, the bursar's office has removed the financial barriers for 396 students who were here during the last fall and spring, who was on the not yet registered report. They're being sent an email today, and I'm going to do a campaign through Navigate to track them in their registration numbers. But they sent an email saying, your bursar's office hold has been removed. If you register between now and the 12th, we will put up to $5,000 on your account to get you to the point of $1,500 where you can register. If everyone on the list took advantage of that, we would spend 1.3 million of those dollars. And this is not counting any students who might be on academic suspension who appeal, and we can help as well. So we're removing all of the financial barriers to getting a student re-registered. And so on the 12th, we will look to see how many of these students have actually registered and put those resources on the account. But we'll have enough resources left over where we can repeat this process in the fall semester as well.
Thank you.
I know enrollment is very important. I think thank you very much for sharing the data. Thank you, Joe, for asking this question. And I know that Patrick is very patient. You may have another question, maybe different, right, Patrick?
Yes, thank you, and congratulations to the administrators present on the good enrollment news. That's always heartening to hear. I had 3 questions, and I just put them in the chat because I figured that would be more efficient than my blabbering through them. So they're over there. Please feel free. I would say numbers 1 and 2 are probably directed to the Chancellor and Vice Chancellor Williams. And then number 3, probably more to Provost Komaraju and Chancellor Lane. So please feel free to respond to them. If I'm taking up too much time, please feel free to say you'll email me an answer, however you wish to respond. Thank you very much.
That's actually a good way of doing that. Thank you, Patrick, for putting it in there. I'll tackle 1 and 2 and then have some others chime in here. I think what we're doing differently than some of those colleges and universities where they've seen some declines is that we were strategic out of the gate, anticipating this national enrollment decline. So we went after more of a high touch, get with superintendents, principals, counselors, teachers, readjusted our scholarship offerings to make sure we were competitive, strengthen our community college partnerships through the Saluki Step Ahead and some of the other programs that are out there. We intentionally recruited the Southern Illinois region. And if you look at our percentage of increase in the region, it's still pretty high, which means that I didn't tell Dr. Jackson at Murray, the reason why his enrollment may be declining is because we're keeping a lot more Salukis here in our region instead of going across the border. I didn't tell him that, but it's not magic, right? So a lot of it was what we call just grassroots recruiting, following up. And most importantly, we have faculty like you helping us, right? It's not just administrators. So we've got faculty on this call. We've got faculty on other Zooms who are always looking to help. And so when you look at the numbers Wendell just showed you from our colleges in terms of where they are, they're doing quite well because of the deans, the faculty, the recruitment and retention coordinators, the advisors, It's an all hands on deck initiative. So I think that that's probably something that we're doing that's giving us a slight advantage in that regard. And we still have some work to do. We find out every day things that we can do better. So we're not perfect. We're kind of a work in progress here. I'll let Wendell kind of give an overview of what we found from the Department of Education as it relates to our financial aid. I think that's what you're talking about with the audit. And just a little history here. I've worked at other places where we've been audited probably 2 or 3 or 4 times. And I was a little surprised that our institution had not been audited in years, if not at all. And so as you can imagine, that's, you want to have a good audit because you want to know exactly what you're doing and how you're doing it. And our team, hats off to our folks in Wendell's area, our folks in the Provost area, in finance and administration, everyone pulled together, and I thought they did a tremendous job in making sure that they got the auditors what they need. So Wendell, you want to give a little sneak peek of what happened, and we can share that, Dr. Lee. For us, it's a good, what we consider a good tool that we're going to use to continue to be better. And so I think in there, it's no secret. So I don't have any problem with us sharing that.
So Dr. Lane, I met with this group at 1 o'clock and I explained the auditing process and how we were not selected. But let me answer your question very directly. Once again, everything that we do with the Department of Education is public information. And so we don't have any intent not to, either the good, the bad, or the ugly. So let me give you a little bit about process. Before the final decision is actually made on what we have to do and all the appeal process is exhausted, you're probably looking at a year to 1.5 years from now. In the next, I think it was 60 days, they'll have an opportunity to take back the suggestions that I shared with you a second ago and all other corrections. For example, it was maybe something in our system that they're not accustomed to reading to, and we were able to provide justification on why it was done a certain way or so. And they said, okay, we found it, we have to report on it, but then we'll say in the report that they've already corrected this. So in 60 days, they will send us something. Then we will have 30 days to make corrections in the errors of fact. We will send that back, and then they take another period of time to make a final determination and finding of any obligations that might have to be. Then we can appeal that decision if we find that there's something not right with that. So the whole process might be March, April of next year is what the estimation might be. So, and then they work with us at that point. But at any point and at all points, the information is public information. It's probably not wise to share right now because we're at the stage now of just exploring, what they found out, whether they're going to actually make a determination on whether it's an issue or not. But we're free to do whatever we want to do whenever we want to do it. But usually you don't share those results until after you get what the determination is and you've exhausted all of the appeal process.
Wendell, did you talk a little bit, we're on to no-show policy. Did you talk a little bit about that when you met?
Yes, that was the purpose for me meeting, was to itemize what we found out in the no-show policy. And the hardest questions came from Patrick and Farhan. And we figured if we could go next week to meet with the faculty, and if we could answer those 2 questions, rest of them be a piece of cake.
Oh, good.
Dr. Lane, I thought you was going to say that the reason for the increases was because of the Associate Chancellor for Enrollment Management, but I didn't hear that, so I guess I got to keep
up. I don't even think I mentioned you.
Yeah, no, you did, not at all.
Good try, though. Good try.
Thank you. And if nothing else, I'm going to get off because I know you guys got everything else, right? Dr. Lane, do you need me anymore?
Well, it's up to you.
With question 3, someone
have another question. Yeah, yes, Provost Kamaraju, do you want to take a stab at that one? This is counter offers. I'm not familiar with some of the offers that are in or out, but
yeah,
can you help there?
Yeah, I can answer that question. So in general, we don't like to lose our faculty. That's our thinking, is that we don't want to lose any of our faculty. And whenever we have an opportunity where the faculty is interested in engaging in that conversation, we do make the counter offer. Sometimes faculty, they're just like, I'm going. And so the deans and the school directors know that we would like to make the counter offer. And sometimes the faculty, I'll just give examples of different conversations that have happened in the past. And that happen is that the faculty members say that, no, you can never match that offer, I'm going. It could be like a director title, or it could be the salary is so much higher, or it could be family reasons, whatever it might be. They're like, I'm not even interested in discussing. And then what we always try to do is, even though the offer that they have is very much higher, we still try to make our best offer. We may not be able to meet that, but in recognition of the service and their contribution and their value, we say, okay, let's try to do our best. So we make that counter offer, and they'll decline it and leave. So when I say that we've made the counter offer, we've done our best offer. And in other situations, the faculty member is not interested in having that conversation. They've kind of made up their mind, they're going. And sometimes we even do a second offer, second counter, and the person is constantly looking, so they're going. So I just want to say that we start from the premise that we do not want to lose our faculty, and if we can do anything to keep them. And by the same token, we have kept several faculty. We have been able to retain them. Yeah.
And Mayor Jennifer, maybe to piggyback on that, I had a question about expediting the hiring of faculty. You want to talk a little bit about that and how that works? Yeah.
So in general, as soon as the hires are, the colleges are intimated that they have a hire, my message to them always is start early, post quickly, make sure that you are doing everything possible to keep the hiring moving along as quickly as possible. And we are working better at understanding the process so that whatever is submitted does not get sent back, because all the information was not submitted in Higher Touch. So those are the improvements that we have made over the last few years, is to just keep it moving along as quickly as possible. And all the parties who are involved, like the school, the college, and the provost office, are working together to make sure that we move things along. And the vice chancellor for research, because the startup request that comes, the vice chancellor for research is involved. That office provides some of the startup. And in fact, in the last 3 years, when the vice chancellor for research has run out of funds, the provost office has actually provided some of that startup, because it's like a one time. It's not like the base salary, it is money that's given over a few years, and then that's it. So the provost office actually has used funds to increase the chances of landing a faculty member. Because what we have found is that the faster we move, the more likely we are to land the best candidates. But if we are slow, then other universities grab them. So we are trying really very intentionally to move as quickly as possible.
Okay, I'm now going to ask you the two questions, which is related to Patrick question number 3. And I have interviewed a few faculty members about why they leave. In fact, some faculty members, before they apply the job, they even, at least 1 or 2, they talked with the director or dean about flexibility of working environment. And that faculty member was very frustrated. And then literally, because we can see, I was told that he could not, or that faculty member could not see any flexibility to accommodate the working environment. And literally, that faculty member was driven away. I do not want to mention which department, which college. So that's, that's something in a way, it's kind of retention. And the point, the message we learned is that, okay, how could we offer more flexibility, resilience to our faculty members to support their scholarship, teaching, and engagement? That's a challenge one. That's why a couple of faculty members left. So that's point 1. And second, I appreciate that you started early and try to recruit faculty member early, which is a great idea, support it. On the other hand, I've noticed that, okay, some administrator, I do not want to mention the name of anybody, with all the due respect, they violate the opening paper without due process. As a faculty senator, it's my job to ensure the process and make sure, faculty member will not complain in order to, yes, we understand the time sensitivity, but the due process is involved. We also understand the situation in which in the summer faculty member are not around. So this is the kind of catch up is catch-22 is dilemma. We want you guys to consider about this. Just 2 comments. Thank you.
Dr. Lane, if you don't mind, I'd like to address Joe's comment. Joe, after our last conversation, I gave a little thought to what we can do once those no-show reports are submitted, is that it will be very easy that after the 10th day to compile a list of all of those students who might show up on the no-show report and share that with your recruitment and retention coordinators to see if they have been able to salvage anyone before we actually make the submission. That would then address Patrick's McGrath that is on we've got 30 days that we have to submit this repayment. So, but we would take our snapshot on the 10th class day and maybe make that adjustment at that point. So I'll incorporate both of those ideas in a process where we could do some intervention then through the recruitment and retention coordinators and the academic advisors.
Yeah, and it's early in the semester intervention too, which is a lot better than what we've been doing in the past. As I said to Wendell an hour ago, sometimes I feel like our retention efforts a lot of times are throwing jelly at a wall and hoping it sticks.
Yeah.
We're trying to do everything we can, but now we actually will have a very robust list of who it is we need to retain or figure out why they're not here. I have a question about something else though, and I want to, since we have a little extra time, I figured I would hold off on this question and ask it if we had extra time. I have received an email along with other COLA faculty recently, which surprised me a little bit. I understood this past winter we were searching for an interim provost for academic programs to replace Dr. Chevalier, who stepped down last week. And then I received an email that my associate dean of students in my college is serving interim in that post. So I guess my question is, without going into the details of it, because I'm not privy to that anyway, more question is more about the process here. Did this search fail for the post starting on July 1, or is there some other surprising reason why something all of a sudden now my college no longer even has an associate dean of students, let alone the candidates that we were looking at for the finalists for the associate provost position don't include the person that's now filling the role, at least temporarily. So I'm just a little confused about where we are. And I'm asking this pretty much from the point of view of loss of institutional memory about how to do academic programming, particularly vis-a-vis my committee, which does a lot of it.
Yeah, I'll give you an answer to that. Those candidates are still in the search, so it's not a failed search. As you remember on this call, I think with the larger group, there was an internal equity issue with the pay for the APAPs. There was a big gap between an existing interim APAP and a possible incoming person. So what we said, or what our promise was, is that we would fix the internal equity piece. And that's what we're doing in this new fiscal year. So when that part gets reconstructed here over the next month or so, the folks who are still in that search will be eligible. By that time, we also think with Dr. Lee's help and finding a new provost, we think we'll have a provost in place mid-fall. So the timing on that, it gives that provost an opportunity as well to look at some of the folks in that role. So it's not fully off the tracks. It's still on there in terms of the folks who are interested in the position. It's just a timing issue, and financially just need to get it where it needs to be, Joe, just to be fair.
Thank you for addressing that, because we had, over the last 2 years that I've served as co-chair of UEPC, we've had over 40 NUIs and program changes. I suspect Lizette was telling me off the record that we had many more in the pipeline. A lot of it is because reorganization has led to faculty coming up with innovative ideas about restructuring and reorganizing their majors, minors, certificate programs, you name it. So I just would want somebody in position that knows it's going to be very big shoes to fill, because Lizette really was at the top of her game with that. But having somebody that actually knows it, that I can dialogue with and facilitate through the various places. So that's really the reason I was asking.
Yep, and we're going to definitely get someone to get us there, but yeah, it'll take a little bit of not too much time, but just to get some things in order. But I appreciate you asking that.
Okay, if no more question, I would like to invite both Chancellor and Provost Conracho to offer some comments.
Yeah, I would really piggybacking on what you said, Dr. Lee. I want to talk a little about retention of faculty. And I think that was kind of a common theme in some of the questions that came up. Just some things that we're doing to help with that. And you heard the provost mention, sometimes it's just, hey, I'm out of here. I had a good 5-6 years and nothing you can do and I'm gone. And I've been in some of those conversations with folks who are leaving, and whether it's faculty or staff, it's just they've got their minds made up and they're moving on. And then, you have some that are leaving because they don't feel like they've been treated well, right? They don't feel like they've been acknowledged or respected. And so some of the things that we're doing that begins as early as this week is that we're going to meet. I'm going to meet personally, and I've invited some other constituency leads to join me. And if they can't, we will highlight who they are. With all new employees, new faculty, new staff that are coming into the institution, myself, the human resources director, our ombudsperson, the folks that we put in some of these positions, we're going to meet to make sure all new employees within at least their first week of being here, if we can time it correctly, have some interaction with what we're doing with our strategic plan, some of the initiatives that we have, some of the resources and benefits that are attractive or hopefully attractive to keep our faculty and staff here. That's really step one. It's more of a relationship piece that we're looking at. Step two, you probably are in the process of hearing about this. We have just finished our internal equity study for A&P and civil. And as you can imagine, in the civil category, they had the most egregious cases of not being paid appropriately in a number of different areas. So on the civil side, we took a full scan of the university, and we've got about 90 civil service employees that we found were just compressed within their salaries or not being paid what they needed to be paid. One example, if someone had been here as a coordinator or a admin assistant for 20 years, and we hired someone in 20 weeks ago and they were making $5,000 more than the person's been here 20 years, we had to fix stuff like that because there were very egregious cases of people not being paid appropriately. That will cost us about $310,000 to do. Where I came from, it was 2.7 million. So when I heard the bottom line here was only 310,000, that's not bad at all. There's still some areas though that we're going to get corrected. It's about 90 in the civil service category. In A&P in that category, there are only about 16. Not as many in the A&P category. We didn't anticipate that there would be many. The civil, we had to move some people away from the minimum wage. We had staff here that were essentially making almost like a student worker's wage. So we had to move entire classifications up to get them separated from that. But A&P has 16 employees. That equates to about $26,000. If you add those two together, you're at about $336,000 that it will cost us to adjust. That's a one-time adjustment that will get us to where we need to be. Moving on now to faculty. We'll start a faculty salary equity committee. And we'll have this committee really go through some of the same exercises to look at faculty salaries across the board in terms of where people are. They paid, as it relates to their counterparts internally, are they paid what they need to be paid? We'll take a deep dive and really look at what that means. If we have folks just like in civil and A&P that are out of whack, then we will adjust those categories and make them whole in terms of where they need to be. On top of all of that, and I hope to have that done at least, that may take some work because the committee, we've got faculty that are going to serve on there. So it may be early fall before we can dig into that, but it's something that we don't think will be too hard to do because we've got a lot of the data that's there. That's phase one. Phase two then, and this is probably a year away, we then start to look at how all of our employees compare to the market. And that gets to the heart of why we lose people. And that's kind of it's going full circle. Sometimes we lose them because we get out, we get outpriced or someone gives them more money and they move on. So we do have to look at other doctoral research universities that are similar to us. And now it's hard to compete with a doctoral research in Chicago. It's going to be hard to compete there because of the salary and the geographic location, the cost of living. So we've got to do it with similar situated universities. So if you're trying to go to another university within our doctoral peer group or very similar in terms of geography, then we hope to beat that institution. So if you're going there, it's just a lateral move for you. Our hope is that you wouldn't go, right? So there's some things that we're going to do internally to start looking at how all of our employees compare to the market. Again, that takes a little bit longer. That's why we started with more of an internal equity look out of the gate. But it is work that we know we have to do. It's things I heard in the Listening and Learning tour when I arrived a year or 2 years ago. It's stuff that we have always been trying to get to. And the bottom line is we had the funding to do it. So the $3.8 million that we're receiving this year, which is a new money for us going forward, we're gonna use a portion of those dollars to cover what I just went over. Also taken to the board in July this month, a 2% across the board increase for all employees to begin obviously in July. But those are just some of the things that we're trying to do to play catch up from what we've not been able to do here over the last maybe 10 years. So as you know, some folks have been without raises, they've been without any increase. So these are some things that we're trying to do to help folks stay here instead of leave or take other counters. So Dr. Lee, I wanted to start piggyback because I know you had that as one of your number one items there. And so that's something I wanted to address. Your second item on there, I don't want to run away from it. You talked about operating papers or just following processes. It shouldn't be rocket science. If we have a process that needs to be followed, we should be following the process. I'm not saying we're not following the process, but what I'm saying is we are committed to looking at and explaining whatever decision that has been made. It's got to be something that's based on our process. And if it's not, we got to go back to the drawing board and do it all over again. So I will work and make sure I talk to the provost often. I talk to Mark Morris and others. So if there's something that we're not doing, I can guarantee you we'll look into it and we'll find out if we did it the right way, or if we didn't, then we'll apologize and we'll start it over, and we'll do it the way that people will see it's fair. Again, I'm going to dig into some of that as we go forward. Moving a little, I know Mira may want to say some things. There's a lot of discussion right now because the governor, there's been an extension on this. You must test if you are not vaccinated. And that's still out there. It's going to be with us for another couple of weeks. We've not heard anything about us not being in person, so we still anticipate being face-to-face and back to almost normal, I guess, if you want to call it normal. But so we are starting to put our messages together for our students that are coming. We have some parents that have been asking, hey, are we going to be fully online? Are we going to be in person? And we're telling them we're going to be right here in person and moving right along. And so we continue to watch that. EOC continues to watch that in terms of our COVID protocols and things that we're doing. I don't want you to think just because it's summer, we've all gone to sleep here. I mean, we are still working on that. That's something we'll be focused in on. But other than that, those are just a few quick updates. I'll be glad to take any questions. I've got a few other things. I think I'll hold those until I can dig deeper into some of the other ones. But any questions, I'd be glad to answer any. And I know, Mira, you're going to need some time as well.
We have about 12, 14 minutes. Maybe Provost Kumraj, you want to say anything? Then if I have a question, we can ask both. Would that be okay?
Yeah, sure. I can provide some updates. So a couple of things that I want to mention is that for the last few years, as we've been like building up to the start of the new semester, we have been sort of like bogged down by the academic reorganization, the administrative structure or pandemic. So looking back at those times, we feel like we have sort of crossed some of those things and we are now able to spend time on things that are like building or things that we have been sort of on the back burner. So with some deans starting new and other directors starting in some new positions, we're doing a lot more training. And we're also planning to do a lot more training for like business managers in the various offices, in the dean's offices and the school directors, because there is constant turnover of staff. And so sometimes the processes are new for the civil service staff. So we are focusing on some of that in these coming weeks as we get ready for the fall semester, is to make sure that all of the new entrants are, have the orientation, the training, and the onboarding is helpful for them as they start the new semester. And Chancellor mentioned that we'll be keeping track of all the information that is the pandemic related and be ready to sort of pivot as needed. But we are expecting that the fall semester will be similar to last fall, where we were completely in person. And the enrollment update, you've already sort of talked a little bit about that we have, and I'll be glad to send Josh, if you're interested, the data that I've typically provided, if you are, find that helpful. On a good note, though, our graduate student applications, their applications are up and admitted students are up. So every week I track those numbers. So even last week, our admissions were down. But I know that we have been working very closely with the graduate school and providing some extra support to get on top of all the contracts that have to be processed. And so we are really working on the process between the academic program and the graduate school in terms of the contracts coming in and processing them and making sure they're done. So right now, our applications are up 28%. So we have about 2,063 applications. And these are more at the master's than at the PhD level. Our admissions are up by 5%. So we have admitted 754 students at the graduate level, and our registrations are down 28%. So even though these students have been admitted, they have not registered for classes. As you know, the graduate students take a little more time in terms of registering. They tend to register closer to the start of the semester. So that's the graduate numbers a little bit. I was glad to see that the admitted students has gone up because we have sort of gone over a hump with the contracts. And so we're sort of keeping close tabs on that piece of it.
Big piece. And I forgot to add one thing that may be helpful. We have Dr. Shaw leading up the indirect cost piece here at the university. They provided me some I thought, very thoughtful recommendations that unless I'm missing something, we're probably going to accept all of them. But I will share that with you, Dr. Lee. You can share with this group as you see fit, the recommendations that just came in. I think it's going to really encourage and incentivize really the work that is being done in the area of research by our faculty. So I'll make sure I remember to get that to you, Dr. Lee, so you can take a look at it from that standpoint. I think you're going to be pleased with what they came up with.
Well, thank you so much, Chancellor Nam, Provost Kumarajo. I think the information you provide us, the answer to our question are extremely helpful. I know some of our faculty member of contract, a few faculty member couldn't be here, at least, today, but ordinarily they should be here. If we do not, anyone have any more question for either Chancellor Nam or Provost Kumarajo? Joe, you have a question? Quick question?
Yes, I do. Sorry to be asking a third question on the same meeting. Comment really, which is, I'm sure you heard this in the listening tour, and I'm grateful that some of the problems that have been here ever since I've been here, 15 years going, seem to be, you're looking to solve some of them. So I wanted to thank you for that. But I would just add that, of course, I perceive, and I'm probably not wrong in this, that one of the big causes of low faculty morale on this campus is we see colleagues depart and whole programs and sub-programs within our programs disappear with them because the line does not come back, or the faculty line, because we have not been able to afford, because we had to cut our positions because of the budget problems of recent years. My department, I'll give you one example. When I started, there were 22 history faculty. We're now down to 8.5. And we're still trying to do a PhD program, a master's program, and 2 bachelor programs with that limited staffing. And I don't need to, belabor it because I think those examples exist throughout the university. So I think, as my comment is, as money becomes available, and I understand a lot of this is the enrollment driven. This is why I keep asking about enrollment. A lot of it is the sound finances of our institution. But as we get in better firm financial footing, I would like to see a lot more effort put into that. And I think that will go a long way towards solving a lot of our concerns that we have as faculty, at the low morale, because we see programs that are not thriving really.
Yeah, Joe, just so you know, and that's a great point. So Thursday and Friday, we have our retreat. And in that retreat, we're actually debriefing with Grays or debriefing on Grays to kind of dig into what you're talking about. So we can have a little bit of an environmental scan of, what should we go with? And then what's going to be the plan, even if it doesn't happen tomorrow? What is the plan then for your area?
What do we aspire into?
Yeah, to get to 22, is it 10 instead of 22? What is it? I think that's the frustration sometimes is give us the plan then, what are we going to do, even if it can't happen tomorrow? So that's what we're going to be working on. In addition, obviously, to some of the UEPs that you've heard me always talk about, the effectiveness plans and in terms of what we do to be accountable, to move the needle in a lot of these different areas. That's one of them. So just wanted to make sure you at least knew we're still talking about that, as we look forward.
Okay, thank you so much. We have about 5 minutes left. Thank you so much. I hope we have no more questions. So if you do, feel free to contact Chancellor Nam, Provost Kumarajo. So I appreciate you guys for the meeting here, especially many of you off contract. And I will see you next Tuesday. So I will need a motion to join the meeting.
So moved.
Anyone second? Well, thank you so much. Meeting adjourned. See you next Tuesday.